People whispered behind her back everywhere she went. A woman with 3 daughters, each from a different father. They called her careless, shameful, unlucky. She heard the gossip at the market, saw the judging eyes at church, felt the cold silence when she entered rooms. But she held her head high. She worked hard, fed her children, kept them clean and respectful. Yes, she had loved 3 men. Yes, all 3 had failed her in different ways. But her daughters would never know that pain. She made one promise to herself and to God. Her daughters would succeed where she had failed. Their marriages would last. They would endure whatever came, and their homes would never break. My daughters, she declared to anyone who dared mock her, will never fail in marriage like I did. And she meant every word. As her daughters grew into women, she gathered them often to teach them about life. They would sit together in the small living room, and she would speak with the voice of someone who had survived storms. Marriage is sacred, she told them firmly. Once you enter it, you never leave. No matter what happens. No matter how hard it gets. Her daughters listened, but their faces showed different reactions. The youngest nodded eagerly. The middle one looked down quietly. But the eldest, the sharp-eyed one, watched her mother with something close to doubt. But Mama, the eldest began carefully. What if? No what-ifs, her mother cut her off. Endurance is a woman's strength. You stay. You fix things. You never run. The eldest said nothing more. But her silence carried a question her mother refused to hear. The first daughter married young and with joy. Her husband was kind at first, but after 2 years, small cracks appeared. He forgot anniversaries. He stayed out late. He spoke to her dismissively in front of friends. One evening, after another argument, she came home to her mother's house with tears in her eyes. I can't do this anymore, Mama, she said quietly. I'm leaving him. Her mother's face went cold. Leaving. Over what? Words. Thoughtlessness. You think marriage is supposed to be easy. It's not just that. Then what? Did he beat you? Starve you? Betray you with another woman? The daughter hesitated. No, but. Then you have no reason, her mother said sharply. Go back to your home. But the daughter didn't go back. She left her husband completely. And her mother turned her face away in shame. The second daughter's marriage looked different from the outside. Her husband smiled in public, brought gifts on holidays, and spoke respectfully to her family. But at home, behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. The first time he slapped her, she told herself it was a mistake. The second time, she convinced herself she had provoked him. By the 10th time, she had stopped counting. One afternoon, wearing long sleeves in the heat to hide bruises, she finally came to her mother. Mama, she whispered, her voice shaking. He hurts me. He hits me when he's angry. I'm afraid. Her mother's face showed pain for just a moment. Then it hardened into the same expression she always wore when talking about marriage. Does he provide for you? Yes, but. Then you endure, her mother said firmly. Marriage has struggles. You stay and you survive. The daughter left her mother's house more alone than when she arrived. The third daughter was the most successful of them all. She built a business from nothing, owned properties, drove expensive cars, and employed dozens of people. Her name carried respect in business circles. Her husband had none of these things. He worked small jobs that never lasted, made plans that never succeeded, and watched his wife's success with growing bitterness. You make me feel like nothing, he told her often. Everyone sees you as the successful one. What does that make me? She tried to lift him up. She praised him publicly, downplayed her achievements around him, and let him make decisions even when his judgment was poor. But it was never enough. His resentment grew quietly, like rot beneath beautiful wood. And while she worked to build their future, he began planning how to take it. The 3 sisters rarely gathered anymore. Marriage had pulled them in different directions. But one evening, the eldest invited her younger sisters to her small apartment. I need to tell you both something, she said, her voice urgent. You need to leave your marriages. Both of you. The second daughter touched her bruised arm instinctively. The third looked away. Mama says. The youngest began. Mama is wrong, the eldest said firmly. Her advice is destroying you. I see it. One of you is being beaten. The other is being used. And you're both staying because you think endurance is strength. For a moment, hope flickered in their eyes. They almost believed her. Then they heard their mother's voice from the doorway. She had come unannounced, and she had heard everything. Get out, she told the eldest coldly. You will not poison your sisters with your rebellious mind. The first daughter lived alone now, in a small apartment across town. People talked about her constantly, the daughter who abandoned her marriage over nothing, who shamed her family, who thought she was too good to endure like other women. Even at her job, co-workers whispered. At family gatherings, relatives avoided her. But slowly, quietly, she began to heal. She made her own money, chose her own friends, and slept without fear or anger. Then one day, she heard the news. Her ex-husband had remarried just 6 months after their separation. A younger woman, eager and smiling. The first daughter felt something strange. Not jealousy, but confirmation. He had replaced her quickly because she had never truly mattered to him. She had been right to leave. But her mother would never admit it. The violence in the second daughter's home grew worse with time. Her husband's anger had no pattern, no reason. He exploded over burnt food, over silence, over her breathing too loudly while he watched television. One night, desperate for proof of what was happening to her, she pressed record on her phone and hid it on a shelf. She captured everything. His shouting, the sound of things breaking, her own pleading voice, and then the sickening thud of his fist connecting with her body. She felt a small sense of power, holding evidence of her truth. But 3 days later, he found the phone while searching for money. He played the recording, his face darkening with rage. You recorded me, he whispered, his voice deadly quiet. She ran, but he was faster. The third daughter's husband was beloved by everyone who met him. He complimented her friends, helped with community events, and spoke about his wife with apparent pride. But alone with her, he was different. He criticized her constantly, reminded her that her success made him look weak, and manipulated her emotions until she apologized for things that weren't her fault. You think you're so important, he would say softly, almost kindly. But without me, who would keep you grounded? She began to believe him. She worked harder to prove her love, to show him he mattered. Meanwhile, he moved carefully through her business, learning passwords, befriending her accountant, signing papers she barely read because she trusted him completely. By the time she noticed money missing from her accounts, he had already taken more than she could imagine. The daughters finally demanded answers. They came to their mother's house together, exhausted and desperate. Why? The second daughter asked, showing her bruises openly now. Why do you keep telling us to stay? Their mother's face crumbled for a moment, then rebuilt itself with familiar stubbornness. Because I know what it means to fail, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Your fathers left me with shame. People laughed at me. I was nothing. So you want us to suffer to avoid shame? The eldest asked quietly. I want you to survive, their mother shouted. Marriage is hard. Life is hard. But you endure it. You don't run like cowards. The youngest daughter began to cry. Even if it kills us? Their mother's jaw tightened. It won't kill you. Endurance never does. It makes you stronger. She believed her own words completely. The beating that sent the second daughter to the hospital was the worst yet. Her husband had found her texting the eldest sister, asking for help. He broke her arm, fractured 2 ribs, and left bruises so dark they looked like shadows painted on skin. At the hospital, nurses asked careful questions. Doctors exchanged knowing looks. But when her husband arrived, full of concern and gentle words, he explained smoothly. She fell down the stairs, he told them, holding her good hand. She's always been clumsy. Haven't you, my love? And she, too afraid to speak truth, nodded weakly. They treated her injuries and sent her home with him. She walked out of the hospital on broken bones, returning to the place where they were broken. Her mother called that evening. "Are you all right?" "Yes, Mama," she whispered. "I fell." 3 weeks later, it happened again. This time, the argument started over nothing. A meal served 5 minutes late. He grabbed her by the hair, screaming inches from her face. When she tried to pull away, he shoved her hard against the wall. Something inside her snapped. Not her bones this time, but something deeper. Her fear broke into rage. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. He dodged, then lunged toward her with murder in his eyes. She ran. He chased her through the house, knocking over furniture, his breath hot and furious behind her. Then suddenly, he stopped. She heard a strange sound, a gasp, then a heavy thud. When she turned around, her husband was lying motionless on the floor. She stood frozen, staring at his body. For a moment, she thought he was pretending, waiting to grab her when she came close. But he didn't move. She dialed emergency services with shaking hands. The police arrived first, then the ambulance. They declared him dead at the scene, a heart attack, sudden and fatal. But the officers saw the broken furniture, her bruises, her terror. They saw a story of violence. "You need to come with us," they said, not unkindly but firmly. At the police station, she sat in a cold room, replaying everything in her mind. She had tried to defend herself. She had run. She hadn't killed him. But would anyone believe her? "We're reviewing CCTV footage from your home security system," an officer told her. She had forgotten they had cameras. Her husband installed them to watch her. Now they might save her. Or condemn her. The first daughter heard about her sister's arrest through a cousin's panicked phone call. She sat in her small apartment, staring at the wall, remembering every conversation. Every time she had warned them. Every time her mother had silenced her. She felt guilt, rage, and helplessness all at once. For years, she had been called selfish for leaving her marriage. People said she gave up too easily, that she dishonored her family. But she had been free. She had been safe. She had survived by refusing to endure. And now her sister, who had stayed, who had obeyed their mother's doctrine of endurance, sat in a police station being questioned for a death she didn't cause. The first daughter grabbed her keys. She would go to her sister. She would speak truth, no matter who tried to silence her now. The third daughter discovered the betrayal on a Tuesday morning. She tried to access her business account to pay suppliers, and the system denied her. She called her bank. They informed her that significant withdrawals had been made over the past 6 months, all authorized by her husband using power of attorney documents she didn't remember signing. Her stomach dropped. She checked other accounts, savings, investments, property holdings. Empty. Redirected. Gone. She rushed home to confront him, but the house was hollow. His clothes were gone. His personal items vanished. Even his smell had been erased. On the kitchen counter, she found a note in his handwriting. "You never needed me anyway." Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo, her husband, grinning widely, his arm around a younger woman, palm trees and ocean behind them. He had planned this for months. And she had let him, because her mother taught her that trusting your husband was strength. The eldest daughter arrived at the police station and demanded to see her sister. When they finally allowed a brief visit, she sat across from her, separated by a table. "I tried to warn you," the eldest said, her voice breaking. "Years ago. Do you remember?" The second daughter nodded weakly. "I remember. But Mama said you were wrong. She said endurance was the only way. And look where endurance brought you," the eldest said, not with cruelty but with deep sadness. "I told you both to leave. I begged you." The second daughter began to cry. "Why didn't I listen?" "Because our mother's voice was louder than mine," the eldest replied. She taught you to survive pain, not escape it. And now. She couldn't finish. They both knew. Their mother's advice hadn't protected anyone. It had led them straight into destruction. The police reviewed the security footage carefully. The cameras, installed by the husband to monitor his wife, now revealed the truth. The video showed everything. His rage, his pursuit, her desperate flight. It showed him raising his hand to strike her, lunging forward, and then suddenly clutching his chest. He had slipped on the rug while chasing her. The shock and exertion triggered a massive heart attack. She had not touched him in those final moments. She had only run. The detective closed the file. You're being cleared of any wrongdoing. This was self-defense interrupted by natural causes. Legal language for a simple truth. His own violence had killed him. But clearing her of legal blame didn't erase the trauma, the years of abuse, or the fact that she had almost died trying to obey her mother's command to endure. They released her the next morning. No charges. No trial. Officially innocent. But the court of public opinion was less forgiving. People whispered that she must have done something to provoke him. That good men don't just die chasing their wives. That she probably got away with murder. Even some family members looked at her with suspicion. She returned to the house where everything had happened, but she couldn't sleep there. The walls remembered too much. The eldest sister came to get her. You're staying with me now, she said firmly. And you're never going back to that house. For the first time since her marriage, the second daughter felt protected. But the damage was already done. Years of pain couldn't be erased by one moment of legal victory. The third daughter spent weeks trying to recover her money. Lawyers told her it would be nearly impossible. Her husband had moved funds offshore, used legal loopholes, and forged her signature so skillfully that proving fraud would take years and cost more than she had left. Her business collapsed without capital. Employees left. Properties were foreclosed. Everything she had built turned to dust. Then someone sent her another photo. Her husband, now living openly with his new woman in another country, spending her money on luxury hotels and expensive cars. He looked happy. Free. Victorious. She had given him everything, trusted him completely, diminished herself to make him feel important, and he had robbed her blind and disappeared. All because her mother taught her that a wife's role was to endure, trust, and never question her husband's authority. The three daughters came to their mother's house together one final time. They stood before her, their lives in ruins around them. One divorced and shamed. One traumatized and nearly destroyed. One financially devastated and betrayed. Look at us, Mama, the eldest said, her voice steady but cold. Look at what your advice did. Their mother's face was stone. You're all alive. You survived. Barely, the second daughter whispered, touching her arm where old bruises had finally faded. I lost everything, the third added, her voice hollow. And I was right to leave, the eldest said. But you rejected me for it. You told me I was wrong. You told them to stay. Their mother stood slowly, her pride still intact like armor. I taught you strength. I taught you survival. You taught us to accept destruction, the eldest replied. That night, alone in her house, their mother sat in the darkness. For the first time in years, she let herself remember. Her first husband, who died young and left her alone with a baby. Her second husband, whose fists taught her that love could be violent. Her third, who disappeared one morning and never returned. 3 men. 3 failures. 3 sources of shame that followed her everywhere. She had endured them all. She survived. And she had been so certain that survival itself was victory. But now, looking at her daughters' destroyed lives, doubt crept in like cold wind through cracks. She had taught them her survival strategy, believing it was wisdom. But what if she had been wrong all along? What if endurance wasn't strength, it was just fear wearing a different name? The daughters returned the next day, refusing to let silence replace resolution. Their mother met them at the door, and for the first time, they saw her cry. I didn't know what else to teach you, she said, her voice breaking completely. After everything that happened to me, I was so afraid. Afraid you would fail like I did. Afraid people would mock you the way they mocked me. She sank into a chair, decades of hidden pain finally surfacing. So I taught you to endure, she continued. Not because it was right, but because it was all I knew. I thought if you could just survive your marriages, you would be stronger than me. The daughters stood silent, watching their mother unravel. But I was wrong, she whispered. I didn't teach you to survive pain. I taught you to accept it. I raised you to stay in destruction and call it strength. The second daughter stepped forward. Do you understand what you did to us, Mama? I was trying to protect you. You were protecting your own fear, the eldest interrupted. You didn't want us to leave bad marriages because you couldn't leave yours. You wanted us to succeed where you failed, even if it destroyed us. The third daughter spoke, her voice empty. I lost everything because I trusted him. You told me trust was loyalty. You told me supporting him was my duty. And I almost died, the second daughter added, her voice shaking. I stayed because you told me to endure. I let him break my bones because you said marriage was sacred. Their mother covered her face with her hands. Our suffering had no direction, the eldest said quietly. It had no purpose. It only had your fear behind it, pushing us toward the same pain you experienced. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. The third daughter was the first to speak again. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mama. You saw me losing everything and you still told me to trust him. You chose your belief over my safety. The second daughter nodded. I showed you my bruises. I told you I was afraid. And you sent me back to him. Their mother reached toward them, but they stepped back. We loved you, the eldest said. We obeyed you. We believed you knew better. And you were wrong about everything. Please, their mother whispered. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, the eldest replied. And now we have to live with consequences that can't be undone. The second daughter turned toward the door. The third followed. They walked out of their mother's house knowing that some damage goes too deep to heal. Their mother stood alone in her empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of her life's philosophy. She had spent decades believing that endurance was the answer. That staying in marriage, no matter the cost, was strength. That survival itself was victory. But her daughters' lives told a different story. One had survived by leaving. One had nearly died from staying. One had lost everything by trusting blindly. And she, the mother who thought she was protecting them, had been the one pushing them toward destruction. She looked around her empty home, remembering when it was filled with her daughters' voices, their laughter, their trust. Now it held only silence and regret. She finally understood the truth she had refused to see. Endurance had kept her daughters in their marriages, yes. But it had destroyed everything inside those marriages. Their safety, their dignity, their futures, and their trust in her.